Welcome to Entrepreneurs, Executives, and Eccentrics, a podcast dedicated to the stories, strategies, and secrets of remarkable individuals. Join us as we engage in enlightening conversations with intriguing entrepreneurs, accomplished executives, and fascinating eccentrics, exploring their journeys, triumphs, and the unconventional wisdom that has shaped their success. Meet Todd Fisher, founder and chairman of Intraprise Solutions. A former Army signal officer, Todd has spent nearly 30 years building tech for healthcare and finance. He shares how he went from military service to launching early web platforms, and the lessons he's learned solving hard problems in high-stakes industries.
Hello, Todd. Tell me who you are and what you do.
Hey, my name is Todd Fisher, as you know, and I am the founder and current chairman of Intraprise Solutions. We are a digital technology services firm with two lines of business. We offer digital technology services, professional services, software engineering, digital transformation in the truest sense of that term as outlined in Tom Siebel's book, Digital Transformation. And we also provide a service, a software as a service platform, technology and offering, specifically to the financial services industry, those banks, credit unions, other institutions that deal in the world of mortgage-backed securities, mortgage servicing rights, whole loan valuations, et cetera. And specifically, we provide by way of that platform, the ability to self-serve valuing portfolios of assets of those types, mostly to comply with regulatory requirements.
So how did you get here? So I know that you spent some time in the military, you get out, and then what is that bridge between getting out of the military and then basically starting your first company?
Right on. Yes, it's kind of a weird connection, right, from a gigantic thing, the Department of Defense and Special Operations Command, to being a sole entrepreneur starting in 1997. When I was commissioned in the Army, I was commissioned as a signal officer, also known as a communication electronic officer in the Army, and served for a special forces unit on active duty back in the late 80s and early 90s. That was quite a jolt to my academic experience to date, because I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics. I'm a big liberal arts fan. I'm a big understanding human behavior person. And so sticking me in the Signal Corps and putting me in an officer basic course with a bunch of electrical engineers from West Point was an interesting endeavor, but I learned to really love how to put those puzzles together and how to solve those problems. And as the military tends to do to young officers and enlisted, they put you in positions of a lot of responsibility and say, figure it out. We'll guide you when you need guidance, but figure it out. And I turned out to be pretty good at that, and learned a lot, was taught a lot by the folks that I was gifted to work with. So when I entered the private sector, I found it interesting. I was kind of treated like a young 20-something when I was, but I hadn't been treated that way previously. And also, I'm a very curious person, and as it turned out, a few years after entering the private sector, I was working for Shearing Plow Research Institute, which is now part of Merck, a life sciences company. And at that time, that was in 1995, 96, we were just starting to see, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was around the time Amazon, Google, everybody started. We were starting to see a lot of business applications make their way onto the internet, with the common user interface being a web browser, a standard web browser. And so I had the idea, having worked previously for a health information technology company that sold electronic medical records, image-based medical records at the time, document imaging. I had the idea that, boy, we could really reduce by orders of magnitude the total cost of ownership of rolling out a system if all they need to do is install a browser on their computer, and we can leverage internet-based technologies. So I taught myself how to
It
write.
was a weird transition there. It was a weird transition, right? Because we went from applications that had to be installed, had a setup file, had a this, to, oh no, you just need Explorer at the time, Microsoft Explorer, right? And then now this kind of all the magic of being able to scale and have anybody just kind of dial in and I mean, people don't remember that's
Right.
really how it started, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it was a painful, costly experience to go around to all those people's computers and reboot them and fix them and troubleshoot them. And all of a sudden, we were back to the world of sharing computers among many people from a central location. The difference, of course, being that the internet is a lot lighter weight and a lot more flexible as it relates to what kind of technologies you can bring to bear, as we've witnessed most certainly in recent years. It's exploded. So yeah, it was a interesting transition. I created a prototype. We showed it at a HIM show. It was a hit. I was provided a contract to build that for a company, and that's how it started.
Was that one of those things you're like, oh shit, I think I've got to do this now? Like you kind of do, you
Oh,
dream
you know
about it,
what?
you dream about it, yeah, yeah.
Honestly, for me, boy, oh boy, the contract, for confidentiality and just for sheer basic reasons, I won't share the size of the contract. But at the time, to me, it's like, wow, this is a big contract. I can go out on my own. In hindsight, I know what I know now. I was like, holy cow, did I step on thin ice? But it was. I was excited to do it. I was excited to jump out and do it. I will tell you, one of the things that the lessons that I have learned over all these years is luck plays a gigantic role in the success of any business person who's successful, but particularly those of us that are entrepreneurs that are taking risk and going out on our own. There years ago I used to think, wow, I'm all this in a bag of potato chips, but now I realize no. There's a lot of forces
But
out there.
but so the luck is a function of timing, right? I believe that luck is like when people say luck, it's like, oh, well, it's just this it's this very random thing, and ultimately it's just basically it's the right place at the right time. It all comes down to the timing is 99.9% of it, right?
Right.
And you were at the right place at the right time. The one person or the person that convinced the DoD or whoever you sold this to, right, that you were the right person to do this medical records or whatever it was at the right, at that particular time. Because a year later, may have been a million providers out there. You would have never had a chance. A year earlier, they were like, no, this is all done in EXEs. We want this on a Windows install disk or whatever.
Right. Oh yeah. Security. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Yes, absolutely right. And I think it was Louis Pasteur said, "Fortune favors the prepared mind." Was my mind prepared? I was prepared to take a chance because I found it interesting. I wanted to do it. I like creating things. I like teaching myself how to do new things. I had been teaching myself how to be a signal officer the entire time I was in the military on active duty, and so it was a continuation of that mindset. And certainly, you're absolutely right. Timing, serendipity. I was in the right place, right time, with the right curious question and the right desire to learn the right things, and it took off from there.
So it sounds like, okay, so you start with this one project / product, right? And then it just feels like you're the kind of human that sees the opportunity. You kind of train up your staff here, then you go on to the next thing. Is that kind of how you got here?
It is. It is. We from there, I and reference and referrals and networking individuals I knew. We moved Intraprise. I was very fortunate to be introduced early on. My brother had been in the Air Force, and he's only 18 months younger than I am, and he actually was in the business with me for decades until just a year and a half or so ago. He was in the Air Force, and he was launching rockets out of Vandenberg about the same time I was serving with the First Special Force Group, and so he was connected to a lot of folks that were in the space industry, and they happened to all be engineers, and many of them were software engineers. And so there were times in that first project where it's like, I have no idea how to do this. Who can I call to ask me, show me? Maybe I'll even pay them an hourly wage to help me figure out how to literally stream. Sounds simple now, but to stream a TIFF image to the browser.
It was a big deal, right? It was
It
a
was a
brand
big
new
deal.
thing back
It
then
was a
because
big
there
deal.
wasn't because the browser didn't even know what a TIFF image was back then, right? And
Exactly
for those of
right.
you who don't know, TIFF image is the old, very low, not so low quality, but very low amount of bytes required, right, to display a document, basically,
Yeah,
right?
and it was the standard. If you scan a document, it's saved as a TIFF image back then. PDFs were not as what they are today. And so I was very fortunate to be introduced to fantastic software engineers that I initially contracted with to help with some of the lower level programming that I would have been taking me decades to learn, and I may not have ever been able to learn it. To work with me on that, and then through that connection, I started to build a web of connections of with folks that were in the space doing similar things, just for different companies, and similar problem domains and problem sets were arising that needed solutions. And I also, was not shy about approaching folks that I knew from, from the jobs that I did have in the private sector, or people that I knew that had been in the military, and I reached out. Now they're in the private sector. And that's actually, so we went really from one project to, that project plus another project by referral and by networking. And we stayed largely in the healthcare domain for the first year and a half. And then I was, and then there was somebody that I knew that had taught at the U.S. Military Academy, and then had gotten out of the military and was running a mortgage company, mortgage origination company, and he was very into technology and wanted to implement technology to enhance productivity. And so we got an opportunity to move into that space. And so we've been, that's where we got our legs initially. And this goes all the way back to the year 1999, 2000. Our legs with respect to, okay, what are all these mortgage documents? What are all the businesses around processing mortgages, securitizing mortgages to trade, things like that. And that's why when we say, we landed in healthcare, largely serving providers, and financial services, largely serving mortgage.
No. What's interesting is I've heard this kind of this I've been hearing this kind of similar story over and over again in the last 2 or 3 years, right? And it goes something like this: I got my first business off the ground. It was profitable. It allowed me to fund my second business, or third, or whatever, kind of back and forth. Is that kind of how this happened as well?
Yes, in spades. In fact, Intraprise Solutions since 1997 has proved to be an incubator of new businesses. Because there have been occasions over the last 27 plus years that where we were able to retain ownership of the intellectual property we were building for somebody else who wasn't in the business to sell that software. They just needed it. And so we were building a solution to a problem for an organization. And then we were able to retain the rights to the intellectual property that was built. And from that, we were able to spin businesses out because that proved to be a problem everyone had. A very good example in the healthcare industry was the back in 2005, we started building and deploying a health information exchange. And one of the smartest things I ever did, I don't want to break my arm, pat myself in the back, but I actually we had enough cash flow where I bought a data center, and was able, and it was a, very sophisticated for the time, secure data center that I could operate at scale with the comfort of the, redundancy and security that was necessary to serve the healthcare industry. And that health information exchange was the result of a project where we retained ownership, and then we spun the business out. Private equity was interested. We grew that business and then sold that business to Siemens Health Services in 2011. And now, similar, we have worked for the last 10, 12, 14 years. I can't remember exactly how long, with Level 1 Analytics and building a technology platform for them to value assets, portfolios of assets, mortgage servicing rights, whole loans, things like that, things that banks have to understand the value of throughout the course of the year and the risks that they face for regulatory requirements, to meet regulatory requirements. And we've had a really good relationship with them. And so rather than spin out, ironically, we spun in, we merged the company into Intraprise Solutions, and now we're one. And that's why we have two lines of business. We still have our digital technology services, which is the traditional enterprise business. And then we have the technology platform and service offering. And we're really now focusing our endeavors in the financial services space.
Right. So it's interesting. One of the things I imagine you learned along the way was, flat feeing projects is very painful because that's never right. Or you know what, we're gonna learn how to do agile, but we're still a little bit waterfall, and like all these different different lessons that smack almost everybody in your area in the head. I'm sure you've gone through. Can you think of a handful that you could share with people who maybe are just kind of starting their first consulting gig or their first? Because when you think about it, you're obviously a hybrid. You're in the service industry, but you've kind of you're building solutions for this space, that space. What were the kind of the 5 lessons you learned, or multiple, right, along the way?
Well, there are a lot of lessons that I learned, and we learned. Lesson number 1 is, at least for me, hiring really, really good people. When to staff up with really good people, talented people. We've had a low attrition level, very low attrition level. So that also means treat them well. That may sound obvious, but it's not always. It depends on who you're talking to as to what treating people well means. And we tended to hire folks. We hired quite a bit from the military, actually. We had a number of veterans, still have a number of veterans that work for us over the years. They just had this is going to sound cliche, they had a can-do attitude, and it wasn't, there was never like, I don't know if I can do this. It was, okay, how are we going to do this and do this effectively? That said, we had a lot of learning on the job. We did do a lot of learning on the job. Our customers have historically been very, very happy with the work we did, but we did a lot of learning on the job. So, a lot of folks, you'd go in and their shops say, I want this methodology followed. And it just would be like, you got to be kidding me. The cost to do it that way is going to be $1 gazillion.
Well, we'll just slightly go to DoD, right? Something like 80 or 90% of all DoD software projects were failing, right? And it was all this waterfall. And there was at one point, I want to say it was like 15 years ago, they're like, no more waterfall. We're doing agile and agile only. If your contract doesn't include for this, don't even bother applying for it. And it's just along the way, you were having these weird mandates where like the Army was doing this or Pentagon was doing that. And at the very minimum, it feels like they're doing like agile fall, a little bit of over pre-planning and whatever.
There's a lot of hybrid, and I learned that too. Is you gain the trust appropriately by doing great work and being a good partner. You gain the trust of your client, and then you make some recommendations as to, we can keep the quality where you need to be. We can make sure that things are documented, but let's maybe build a hybrid approach here, and take a, what you call it, agile fall. That's a great way to put it. And there's not only one right way to solve for these problems. And that was a lesson. That was certainly an important lesson that I learned. Hiring well. I was very fortunate, and also learned how valuable that is. And Lord knows I've made plenty of mistakes as well, but maybe we'll go to those later. But those lessons, and then the other, just from pure business, if you're starting a new business, and you want to understand, and you came out of an MBA program or something, and you're thinking about gross margins, et cetera. The fact of the matter is, one, we've always focused on the digital technology services side. We focused on solutions. We explicitly say, if you're looking for body shop, that's not us. We don't. That's not what we do. It's not that we think it's bad. It's just not economically viable for the level of sophisticated engineers and whatnot that we have in our business. That said, still, dollars for hours or even fixed price engagements to meet milestones, et cetera. That only scales so much. And so, there's a reason why we've spun out software as a service businesses, and we've retained ownership of certain technology platforms that we saw potential in. And that's because that subscription model that a software as a service model offers, or even managed service aided by technology offers, is very scalable, tends to be very extensible in the industry that you're serving, and by extension is much more profitable and
Yeah, and
valuable.
also you're not having to fight tooth and nail for that next invoice either, right? Because it just comes off, right? It just is, and I would anybody who is listening who's in their 20s or 30s and just started a company, for the love of God, and automate your invoicing, like automate the payment. Don't chase the money. If as a CEO you find yourself 25% of your time is yelling at accounting because of these like 90-day terms, that like some crazy terms, don't do that. Like, you got to sign up for my portal. You got to put your billing information in there, and I'm just going to bang it when the invoice comes due, and it just changes everything. It makes it so much better, just so much happier,
Amen.
right?
It sure does. It sure does. It's beautiful to know exactly on this day I am going to get paid by this client this much money. It is a beautiful thing, and there were many, many years when that was being done regularly where I called it dialing for dollars. There are dollars I was dialing for, but I would be, can you pay now? Can you pay now? And in healthcare, I mean, I don't want to throw healthcare under the bus. I actually, it served the industry served me very well. And there's a lot of improvements that can be made, certainly in our healthcare system. And that's a podcast for another day. But I will say that, their average AR days they're out there. They're long. So I learned the lessons that you just articulated pretty quickly. And that was a very good point.
When that $40,000 payroll moves around, and it's and you're like, well, geez, I've got 300,000 in in accounts receivable, but no one's paying. Like, at what point? Like, why did we ever think it was okay to just go submit an invoice and just hope they're going to pay it one day? Like, what did that? Like, why was this? It's an agreement where you're going to pay it, but we're giving you the option to make it late. Like, I never understood that at all. Like, I never got that.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And it actually reminds me of another important lesson I learned is don't be afraid to avail yourself of good legal services to support your contracting process, or whatever it is that you're doing, where you really, especially in the industries that we're in, where there's a lot of regulatory requirements that we're serving. If we make a mistake, there's a lot of issues that could, become significant if we're not properly protected from an insurance perspective, a business insurance perspective, and a legal perspective. And so it's not like, I'm not suggesting people need to spend gazillion dollars in transaction fees, but don't be afraid to seek out legal counsel to help draft agreements, to help review agreements. Don't assume they're all the same, because they aren't. And to your point, some, we can go 300 days before we pay you without any penalty, without paying prime plus whatever. You can't. And so that was a valuable lesson. I learned that early as well, and it's paid itself back times 1,000 over the years.
Yeah. Also, that the difference between a build contract and a service contract, right? And the ability to go, okay, well, we're going to charge you X amount of dollars to go build this thing, and then we're going to charge you a different, completely thing that's due monthly, every 30 days, right? That's gonna, or prepay, right, even that to actually, right, service the thing needs to be, and I'm sure, are you doing MSAs and SOWs?
Yes.
Okay, so for those who don't know, an MSA, a master service agreement, is how we do business, and SOW is actually what we're executing on, right? And that's literally that. I believe that was birthed in the software industry or the engineering industry, and I've carried that. But think about it now. If you need an SOW2, well, it's only like a one pager because you terms are already agreed upon on the MSA. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Things become so much easier. You're not having to read 30 pages of documents, just like a handful of pages, and boom, there's your new SOW. Yeah, and I've moved that all the way into every other industry that I'm in, right? It's not just software anymore.
Yeah, well, it's a model that works, and you can streamline it, and you streamline it by streamlining the relationship between the MSA and the SOW, and the flow through terms. And then if there is a contradiction in terms between the SOW and the MSA, what carries the day, just being clear about that. And once that's all set, it's just, now it's like a work order is the equivalent of a purchase order. It's just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, because they're not having to spend $500 an hour to go read your damn contract, right? Because they've already agreed to the MSA. It's just, this is what we're doing. This is what we're getting paid to do it. Everything else has already been agreed upon.
Right.
It's so much faster. And now your contract turnaround is a week, not a month or two.
Correct. And in fact, and we've had several very long-term customers. We've operated under a single MSA for dozens of years in some cases, and we're on work order 25, 26, 27. And then the agreements for software as a service arrangements, they're a different animal, and they have implementation. Some of them have implementation considerations in the agreement, and so that has to be considered certainly, and then also from setting up the subscription and all the rules around that, and backing up the data, and whose data is it, and where is it stored, and how many places is it stored, and all that. And of course, this is where I think this is a very important point to make in the day of AI. Knowledge of the domain itself, the vertical market domain, particularly highly regulated domains, but I would say in general, is really very important, because just because you can do something theoretically, and now with AI you actually can do it, doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do given the constraints that may exist that wouldn't be contemplated in any particular deployment of artificial intelligence to support the development of a system. And so you have to consider those things as well. And so we've learned all those lessons. They're very valuable lessons, and I think that's why we've been able to successfully keep a line of business that delivers sophisticated digital technology services, and also provide high levels of service with software as a service, because we're staying in our knowledge domains. We're staying in those vertical markets that we have been in for, now 27 years, 26 years, I think it's 27 years for healthcare and 25 and a half or so for financial services in the business of cracking data tapes into a database and then valuing portfolios based on certain algorithms and models.
Wait a minute. So when you say data tapes into databases, are you saying that you're modernized is a terrible word, digitized, right? It's like, oh, I see that you're on the AS400, right? And I see that you're on the green screen. We're going to take all of that garbage data and actually make it to an actual, put it to a database that can be queried and safe. And I guess that's what, has that been
that's
a main
exactly
line
what
of
I meant.
well?
Yeah. Back in the day, we called it tape cracking, because they would give you a tape, and we would take that data that was on the tape or the disk or whatever it was, and we would process that, transform the data, normalize the data, get it put away in a database in a way that would allow for the system to scale. In fact, the number of opportunities that we've had and the number of engagements we've undertaken for customers to move them from doing very sophisticated and complicated stuff in Excel, but only one person at a time, into a high performance computing environment where you could throw all kinds of processors and all kinds of data simultaneously, and all of a sudden you're jumping from being able to do one simulation on a tranche of loans to a month or a quarter to 20 simulations of all the loans that are owned or serviced by an organization several times a day, and under several different conditions.
For the last 12 years, I've basically been paid to do this very well. My organization has been paid to do a couple of things, but the main thing is, you're on the I series, or you're on this old VB6 platform, and you want to go move that off, and it starts like level one is like, okay, we're gonna throw an API that the web can talk to, but it's still talking to your terrible database. Level two is we're gonna slowly replace those API calls. Let me say API calls but will slowly replace where the data is being stored in a safer kind of way, and then interface all that kind of stuff. And it just feels like that's probably going to be around for a little while longer. I was calling it digital archaeology because you're literally like, oh yeah, the guy that wrote this has been dead for like 11 years. We don't even know how it just kind of works, right? It's not even being backed up, and that's kind of what we were being paid for to do. And I kind of see those projects are slowly winding down. Digitalization, it's all kind of slowly going away. All that stuff's finally being modernized.
Yeah, the switch though now is I have this on-premises system that's operating in the basement, and it operates mission critical systems for us, and it's all digital, and the data is fine and everything, maybe. But how am I going to take advantage of all this rapid advancement in technology? Because I can't afford to buy myself. I'm going to use an example to make my point here. It's a little out there, although it's coming fast, is I can't afford to buy a quantum computer. So how am I going to take advantage of that? Well, the democratization of access to all that technology is really found in the public cloud. And so there is a path of transformation from systems that are built to be on premises to being maybe a hybrid on premises and a private cloud to being on premises, private cloud, public cloud, and then getting that moved over. And we are doing a lot of that, and we see a lot of that. And it's always, and to your point about data, Scott, it's spot on. It always starts with the data. What's your data look like? What do you have? I'm surprised at the amount of value that exists. I'm going to use retail banking as an example, particularly small and mid-sized retail banks. They're sitting on a mountain of value in the data that they have, because they've been operating for years in communities, and honestly, they have a ton of very valuable data, and it just needs to undergo a process to be able to understand what you have, clean it to the extent that it needs to be cleaned, organize it, and leverage the heck out of it. Data as an asset carried on a balance sheet is not something that you only kind of dream about. I don't believe many people, if any, do that right now, except the likes of big tech. But most organizations would be able to do that, depending on what what their business is. Retail banks, with respect to their consumers, certainly would make sense.
Yeah, I years ago I read something. One of the architects over at Google wrote a book, and it went something along the lines of, "We save everything because we don't know how valuable it is. It may not be valuable now, but one day it could be. It could actually, if we go monetize it somehow." And you kind of read deeper, like, "Oh yeah, well we took telemetry data from these cars. We didn't know if it would be valuable, and they learned years later it would be valuable. They harnessed it up to be valuable. They sold it off." There's value in most people's data. They just don't even know how to make it happen is the problem.
Right. Exactly right. And that value is there, and properly leveraged. It's like having, back in the Industrial Revolution, it's like, okay, I own an assembly line that I don't even know I have.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
That's pretty important to know that you have it, right? And then leverage the crap out of it, and you will find that you get very good results. Absolutely true.
Todd, I really enjoyed our conversation. We're out of time. I will add all the links to your site and your companies at the bottom of this episode. Thank you very much for doing this. I really love talking to you.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. I like talking to you as well. And good luck to you.